Hello, everybody. This is Danny Davis with the Austin American-Statesman, and every week here on the Longhorn Confidential, we like to bring on an expert, someone who knows a thing or two about the team that Texas is playing. So, Jackson Fuller, we had to bother him for a couple of minutes today. Jackson writes for the Southwest Times Record. He covers the Arkansas Razorbacks, and Arkansas is coming to town this weekend. So let's talk a little bit about the pigs, the Hoosui. What do they say? What do they say up there about the Arkansas?
Woo pig suey, the hogs, I guess, more so than the pigs. But there hasn't been much hog calling this year, at least not at the ends of and not at the end of games this season.
You can follow Jackson on Twitter at JacksonFuller16. You can also read his work over at swtimes.com. Remember that Twitter handle because I'm going to ask you at the end to hit Jackson up with some recommendations because he's coming to Austin for the first time this weekend. So hit this guy up with some food recommendations, tacos, barbecue, whatever he needs because we have a little bit of that here in Austin. But let's talk football first before we talk tacos. Jackson, Arkansas, as you very well know, 2-8 this season, winless in SEC play. They've already gone through a midseason coaching change. Sam Pittman's out. Bobby Petrino is in. So we'll start with the vibes in Fayetteville. What's kind of going on there? Is Bobby Petrino an actual candidate for this job? Now he's currently the interim coach. What's kind of going on in Fayetteville right now?
Bobby was certainly a candidate. When they named him interim coach in the press release, Hunter Yurachek, the athletic director, said Bobby has expressed his interest in the position and he will be considered as one of the candidates. I think, you know, that's obviously his chances have gone down. I mean, they're 0-5 since he took over. You just haven't seen enough like real changes of since he took over from, where this program was under Coach Pittman to where it is now under Coach Petrino. Now, I think that might be a little unfair because this is not Bobby's defensive staff. We know when he was the offensive coordinator, he was not doing anything on that side of the football. I think the defense has performed a little bit better in recent weeks, but it just feels like if he was going to be a real candidate for this job, he was going to have to rattle off some wins. And 0-5, tough games against Texas and Missouri left on the schedule. It just feels like in Fayetteville, everyone's ready for a fresh start. Let's hit the reset button on this program and go get somebody new.
And they are 0-5 in conference with Petrino, 0-6 overall. Five of those losses, including one that is attributed to Sam Pittman, have been by 6 points or less. So Arkansas has been in a lot of these games. Why have the Razorbacks just not been able to close the deal, including last week losing by one to LSU?
The defense is just like really bad, honest. I mean, I've tried to find a different adjective there, but it's been really bad all year. And in the fourth quarter, when it's gut check time, opposing offenses have just kind of pushed on the button that they know can be successful and, go into some trends, whatever they found either in the weeks building up to the game or in-game adjustments. And the defense just hasn't been able to get enough stops inside the fourth quarter. Turnovers have also played a huge role, especially early on when Coach Pittman was here. They should have beaten Ole Miss on the road. They were driving to go win that game in the fourth quarter, fumble, they lose. Next week at Memphis, a much worse opponent, but the same situation. They're driving to go win that game, fumble last drive, they lose. But turnovers have kind of played an ugly head earlier in games too, and that's eventually proved too much to overcome at the end. So I would just say the defense has a knack for giving up big plays at the wrong times, and the offense just commits too many turnovers to win these close, small margin type of games.
You really can't have many Arkansas conversations without talking about Taylen Green, number 10 on the scouting report, maybe number one in everyone's hearts over there in Fayetteville. You can't call him the best quarterback in the SEC just because of how Arkansas has fared. But where does he kind of rank among SEC quarterbacks? Because the stats definitely are probably comparable to most quarterbacks in a conference that's going to produce a couple Heisman Trophy contenders.
Upper half, but I'm not willing to go upper quarter, honestly, just because like what I just kind of mentioned, the turnovers. I mean, he's at fault for a lot of those, whether it's bad interceptions or a fumble when, he gets sacked. He's made some poor decisions in terms of like when he tries to do too much. And it's hard to really criticize him for that particular bit of his game because he's under pressure, and a lot of times when he tries to do a little bit too much, sometimes he pulls it off, and it can look like he's going to get sacked for a 15-yard loss, and then all of a sudden he's running down the field for a 30-yard gain. He's such an explosive player. He, can make defenders miss, but he also has these like just long legs, these long strides where he just runs away from people in the open field. So, the stats tell a story of a guy that might, like you said, should be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. But at the end of the day, he's just not getting it done, especially late in games. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know how much to ding him for that because, like I said, the defense isn't very good. They've got, their running backs and their wide receivers are all guys that like were at G5 programs last year or young players. And he's really, I feel like he's maximized his statistical output at least. But at the end of the day, you got to win more than 2 games, I think, to be considered one of the top 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in this conference. And there's just too many head scratching mistakes. I mean, last week against LSU was a perfect encapsulation of that. He has a play action. He's rolling to his right. The tight end is wide open. Bobby Petrino said in media availability this week that was the first read, and he tries to force it down the field into triple coverage to a wide receiver, and it gets intercepted. And it's just stuff like that. It happens a little too much. And but it's a complex legacy for him because he has been so good, but the record just hasn't quite matched that.
Aside from Taylen, who's maybe a name or two on this Arkansas offense that Texas fans should be aware of before this weekend?
Mike Washington, the running back, is definitely, I think, if Taylen's 1A, he's 1B to the offense. He's got close to, I think he's over 900 rushing yards now. He's going to be the first 1,000-yard rusher here since Rocket Sanders a few years ago. Just an explosive, dynamic athlete that, he's really good at finding holes and, navigating that tight inside the line of scrimmage, but then also athletic enough to run away from people. But a guy I think that Arkansas, when their offense is really humming, that's going for them is tight end Rohan Jones. He can play fullback. He can line up as a tight end, as a slot receiver, and a guy that's very, very explosive, when they do call upon him. I think he's averaging over 30 yards a catch. He only has like 10, 13 catches, something like that. But when he does touch the ball, it goes for long gains. I mean, offensively, those are the 2, home run threats that Arkansas has other than Taylen.
You mentioned that the defense has not been good, but when Steve Sarkisian's kind of doing his offensive game planning this week, is there a defensive player too that he's maybe trying to stay away from, or someone he's definitely has caught his attention on this Arkansas defense?
Yeah, it's Quincy Rhodes, defensive end, a junior. This is really his first season of meaningful playing time. He backed up Landon Jackson last year, who went on to be a 3rd-round pick. And coming into the season, a lot of the question was, hey, like, how is Arkansas going to generate a pass rush this year? They lost so many guys that were part of that defensive line last year. But Quincy has arguably been one of the better defensive linemen in the country. I've seen some mock drafts that have him going inside the 1st round, which is just crazy considering this is, like I said, his first year of really consistent playing time and snaps. I mean, he leads the team with 8 sacks. I don't know, 15 tackles for loss, something like that. He's a really, really terrific pass rusher, and he's somebody that stays on the field for most of the game. Now, maybe that goes into what I said about this defense not getting enough stops in the 4th quarter. Like there's not a lot of depth on that unit. But if Quincy Rhodes is definitely a game breaker and someone I think Texas, if they block him, the offense will probably have a good day. But he can be, a guy that ruins things for an opposing offense.
Jackson, as I'm sure you've probably heard this week, and as I've heard, the past year or two, I mean, some of our older readers will call them. This is Texas Arkansas is kind of their rivalry. That's kind of, they grew up on some, game of the century and all that stuff, and that old school rivalry. I think you wrote this week for the Times Record about Bobby Petrino kind of leaning into that old school hate. I'm kind of wondering overall, though, with a new generation of Razorback fans, do people care about this rivalry, or has this game been circled for a lot of Arkansas fans? I mean, they haven't been to Austin since 2008, but do people care about this game?
I think so. And I think, it makes sense that people probably care a little bit more on the Arkansas side of things, especially in a younger generation. Arkansas fans are like they're craving a rival. You know, the SEC has tried to push Missouri into Arkansas's space, into Arkansas's rivalry space. And I think it's been effective. I mean, those two fan bases, they kind of both don't think the other should be a rival, and that's created a rivalry and this weird, created hatred between the two. Obviously, Texas, LSU, and Missouri are going to be Arkansas's three permanent opponents starting next year. LSU has the history of the Golden Boot, but I think just when the older generation experienced it and the younger generation is aware of the history and excited about, with Texas moving to the SEC, the potential of what this rivalry could do. And I think you see that in some ways, not only in football. Basketball's one, but baseball too. Last year, when Texas came to Fayetteville for a weekend series, and Texas was #1 in the country, I thought that was arguably the best home environment for Arkansas all year until Tennessee came in the Super Regionals. So I think the older generation of, like you said, of course, knows and treats it as a rivalry. I think on in Arkansas's perspective, the younger generation wants it to develop and get back to that. Of course, Arkansas just has to play a little bit better on the gridiron to maybe manifest that.
I'm not sure if you were around in 2021, but when Texas came to Arkansas, I was in that press box. I won't forget that night. There was definitely, it was pretty electric in Fayetteville that night. They definitely cared. That was definitely a rivalry that night.
Yeah, I wasn't here, but like everyone kind of, that was I think the year before I came here, and everyone just points to that night as like it was the best night of the Sam Pittman tenure. It was one of the best nights Arkansas has had this century, honestly. And I think that's like it's no coincidence that it was Texas, right? It's not just like the score and a ranked opponent at home and the optimism of Pittman early in his tenure. I think the team, the logo, the Longhorns played a big part in that as well.
Well, I guess this rivalry will resume this weekend at DKR, 2:30 p.m. If you were watching back home in Fayetteville or you're in the Austin area and can't make it to the stadium, it's an ABC telecast, so be sure to tune in there. This is Jackson Fuller. You can find him on Twitter at JacksonFuller16. Hit him up, taco recommendations, barbecue recommendation, awesome fun recommendations, or you can read his work at swtimes.com. Jackson, I appreciate the time, and we look forward to seeing you here in Austin this weekend.
Thanks, Danny. Really looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Deuces.